All right, y'all ready to roll? All right, 1 Corinthians 10. Let's jump in. We're pretty much going to continue on this theme of the food sacrificed to idols, but he's going to make a big, broader argument this week in chapter 10. But then he'll dovetail it back into the same discussion. But he wants to, you can tell he wants to kind of draw back a little bit and get a little deeper conversation or a deeper argument that he has. Cool. So everybody ready? We ready to jump in? We got handouts. Got plenty of those. Okay. All right. Now I want you to know, brothers, or I want you not to be ignorant, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. They all ate the same spiritual food and all drank the same spiritual drink, for they drank from the spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. But God was not pleased with most of them, for they were struck down in the wilderness. All right, first thing we need to address, who's the audience of the letter to the Corinthians? Do we get any evidence here? Hebrews. What makes you say that? He does reference the Old Testament. Does that definitively mean that these are Jewish people? Sure he is, but does that definitively mean he is therefore talking to a Jewish audience? There's some evidence that you might preclude that, all right? Yeah, there it is the key. Our fathers did this. He also refers to them as what? As brothers. Now, does that mean they're Jews? If he just says brothers? No, certainly he could mean Christian brothers and the Christian brotherhood thing. But when he uses that term, our fathers were all under the cloud. All right? Now, would you make the argument that therefore the Corinthian church was made up of exclusively of Jewish people? No? 80%, that's your estimate? Any reason you're basing that, or you just find a number and just grabbed it? I thought so. Pulled one out of left field. You know, that's called a left field number right there. No, but we do want to understand this because this will illuminate a lot of the text for us. Anytime you know the audience, I always say when you read something, you need to know the author, you need to know the audience, and you need to know the atmosphere or the situation, all right? That'll tell you a lot about a letter, okay? When Jesus tells a parable, you need to think, who's he talking to? In what environment, all right? This illuminates. It provides what? Context, right? And what do we say around here? What's key? Context, 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 all right? So I want you to know, or I don't want you to be ignorant. It's kind of, the translation is the same. I don't want you, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud. How were they under a cloud? How were their fathers under a cloud? Exactly. It led them in and through the wilderness for 40 years, all right? Now, it's hard to walk around that area for 40 years without going, haven't we been here before? Weren't we here like Tuesday of last week, all right? If you march from Cairo to Jerusalem, it'll take you 7 days. That gives you an understanding of what they did for all this time, that they spent what was a 7-day journey, took them 40 years, all right? So God just says, you're just going to keep marching. Why? Was that the plan? Was the plan for them to march for 40 years in the wilderness? No, it was what? That was the punishment, wasn't it? Yeah, the punishment was because you didn't trust me for 40 days, you looked around and spied the land. For 40 years, now you're going to wander. Okay? And that's part of the text here today. So they were all under the cloud, which somebody pointed out today, they made the argument that the people were literally under the cloud, that it wasn't so much a pillar of cloud that they followed, that sort of this, literally a pillar of cloud, but that it was a covering of cloud, that they were overshadowed by the cloud. And somebody made the argument that because they were literally in the desert wilderness, that for 40 years, that cloud cover was what they followed, and they stayed under the cover of that cloud, which kind of makes sense, but you do whatever you want with that. All right? Our fathers were all under the cloud and all passed through the sea. Which sea? The Red Sea. Okay, he's just making this argument. They went through the sea. And all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All right? So did they all get baptized in the wilderness? Is that a euphemism? Is that sort of rhetorical language here? All right? Yeah, they were immersed in Moses. Some people would argue they were immersed in the law of Moses. All right? And what you're going to see here, we have two of the basic sacraments in the Christian faith. One is baptism and the other being communion. All right? The baptism and communion were essentials in the first century. That this is the two things that you do. All right? So he's arguing, and he's making this argument, and he's going to roll back around to the food sacrificed to idols. All right? So he's simply pointing out they all went through this. They went through this baptism. In verse 3, they all ate the same spiritual food. What spiritual food did they eat? The manna. What does manna mean? What is it? They looked on the ground and went, what is that? And went, okay, we'll call it that. All right? So there's some interesting definitions of it in the text. Some people said it was like honey wafers, which kind of sounds like breakfast cereal to me. All right? But they ate it for 40 years. All right? Every day it was there, right? Every day? Not on the Sabbath day, not on the seventh day. Very good, very good. Y'all caught me. All right? No, it was there, and they collected. And what happened with the leftovers? It spoiled. All right? Yeah, it spoiled. Did what? No preservatives in that manna. It just went bad immediately. It actually evaporated as the morning grew. Sort of like the morning dew. It melted away, gone. All right? So it's interesting stuff. All right? So they all ate the spiritual food. They all drank the same spiritual drink. Now, this is when it gets interesting, okay? Because what did they drink in the wilderness? From what did they drink? The rock, okay? Which is a really interesting thing, that the water came from the rock. And I always wonder how that worked. Did it literally come from out of the rock? Or did it come from out from under the rock? The rock was sitting on top of the spring, or if it just literally came out of a rock, which would be a really cool miracle. Because generally rocks don't have water inside of them, especially enough to give 2 million people something to drink. So whatever that was, it was obviously a miraculous event, right? All right? And Moses struck the rock and didn't get in trouble, and then he struck the rock and he did get in trouble. Okay? But again, what's he doing? He's making the argument, we are akin to these people who were under the cloud and went through the sea into freedom. This is this picture of baptism, all right? And we ate the manna and we drank the water, and it is Christ. So what's he doing? Again, he takes baptism, which Jesus gave us, and he takes what? Communion. And does this. And so what he's lining up is we have these religious practices that we revere. They're sacraments. They are sacraments to us. So we hold these. And I think the point he's trying to make is the pagans in Corinth, they have their own sacraments which involve offering food to idols and then eating them as a form of worship. They also have cult prostitution, that this would be a sacrament to them. Okay, so he's sort of using these metaphors as an argument to verify what he's going to say. All right, in verse 5, but on the contrary, but even though they did that, God was not pleased with most of them, for they were. Does anybody have a different word here for struck down? Thrown down, overthrown. I wouldn't go there. Scattered is a better word, spread out. On the day of the triumphal entry, what did they do with their coats, their cloaks? All right, so if you were to observe the triumphal entry, what would you see along the the road coming down the Mount of Olives into the Kidron Valley and up, what would you see? You would see coats or outer garments, their cloaks, just strewn all the way down, all right? This is the imagery that Paul writes here, that the bodies of these 2 million people, all right, 600,000 men of fighting age, I always use the number 2 million. All of them died. 600,000 men's bodies, except for 2, died and were just strewn, spread out, scattered, thrown down in the wilderness on that path, all right? That's pretty brutal, all right? Because if you throw the women in there, you got over 1 million people that just died, and just, what do you do with them? You just leave them along the way. And this is what Paul is trying to point out, just the gravity of this moment. So, but God was not pleased with most of them. All right, so God was not pleased. Why? They were struck down, they were spread out in the wilderness, all right? And I just think that there's an expectation. God has expectations of people, and he has consequences, and there is judgment, all right? And that judgment may be swift and it may be slow, but there is going to be judgment because there is an expectation, because there is a created order. And a God that doesn't have expectations, accountability, and justice and judgment is a God who doesn't care about his creation and doesn't have rules. And if you don't have rules for your creation, you can't be loving. All right? Does everybody see sort of the progression of that? I created, therefore I love. And I give them rules because there are consequences, natural consequences to this thing. And I am holy, and therefore I will judge, because unholy cannot be in my presence. All right? So there's always justice, there's always judgment at the end of this. Verse 6. Now these things, this striking down, thrown in the wilderness, became examples to us, so that we will not desire evil. Anybody have a different word there for evil? Desire kakos. It's our word kakos. We won't desire the evil, mean, horrible, nasty things as they did. Number 7, he lists in 7, 8, 9, and 10 4 sins. Do not become idolaters, as some of them were, as it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink and got up to play. What is that? When were they idolaters? Yeah, remember, let's break down the word idolatry, all right? Ido means what? Y'all remember? E-I-D-O, what I see, what I observe with my eyes. Latreu is to worship, not to sacrifice. Sacrifice would be thusia, but to worship is latreu, all right? Since you're real close there, come over here to Romans 1. And I'll see you. Paul makes this argument against the Romans, or to the Romans. In 1 verse 22, it says, claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God and images. Spam risk. All right. Sorry. And exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images, what? Resembling, looking like, what we see, resembling mortal man, birds, four-footed animals, and reptiles. What did they make their idols to look like? Things they saw. So, idolatry, I worship the things I see, which God explicitly says in the second command, what? Do not make what? Idols. Because you can't see me. You can't observe me. So anything you create that even represents me in your eyes is a false image. And you will inevitably, start to worship this object and not the God that is here. Okay? Everybody cool with that? All right, so that was the point of that second command. Anything you do will become a false idol. It will become something that is not true, okay? And what happens when Aaron makes the golden calf? You all remember what his excuse was? When Moses confronts him on this, they said, it just came out in a calf. I didn't really do anything to it. I'm like going, does anybody believe you, Aaron? I mean, really? anybody here believe what Aaron just said? No. Well, no, because they made a gold. And what did they say about this golden calf? This is a God that we picked up from Egypt, and we're going to claim him as our God. No, they said, this is the God. This represents the God who brought you out of Egypt. So they weren't worshiping a false God, in essence, but they were worshiping an image, an eidolon of this God. So this is this idea of idolatry, and God goes, that's not me. That's not what I look like. That's not who I am. And I know you may start off worshiping me through this, but eventually you're going to start to worship this. What happens in the temple? The temple originally, when Solomon initiates and ordains the temple, what is it? It's a place to come and encounter God. Well, by the time Herod comes around to it, what is it? This is the place where you worship the place and not the God who reigns here. That's the whole point of Jesus cleansing the temple. He's going, whoa, 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 what are you doing? You've lost the point of what this temple was, all right? So that was the first one. Do not become idolaters. This is a warning. You can read in the Old Testament, don't do it here. Again, was that prevalent in Corinth, idolatry? Absolutely. Absolutely it was. Because they're sacrificing food to them, right? All right, that's the point we're going to roll on to. In 8, let us not commit sexual immorality, all right, porneia, as some of them did, and in a single day, 23,000 people fell dead, all right? Now, this is an incident in Numbers 25. It's Baal of Peor, all right? This is when Phinehas, who was the soon-to-be priest, noticed a guy walking into his tent with a little Moabitess princess and walks right behind him and just shish kebabs both of them. And God goes, I like that guy. I like what he's doing. His zeal for me is what I love. And he said, and he will always be a priest in my economy. All right. And so this was this incident. So number one, idolatry is off the table. Sexual immorality is off the table. In verse 9, let us not test Christ as some of them did and were destroyed by snakes. What's the story here? They're testing God. They're asking, is God with us or not? That's the test. All right? They're saying, God, we don't even know if you're even with us. All right? Jesus is tempted in the same way. Go up to the top of the temple and jump off, because when you jump off, Satan told him, the angels will catch you. And Jesus says, I don't need to test God to see if he'll catch me. All right? And I think parents, we need to hear that. Be careful. Don't let your kids jump off temples because they're not sure if you're going to be there or not. We need to live our lives as parents so effectively that they know we'll be there, and they don't need to prove anything to anyone. You sure don't want them testing. All right? Will my parents bail me out? Let's see. No. Good luck. Get comfy. We'll see you in a couple of days, maybe, all right, at the arraignment. All right? But they were destroyed by snakes. All right? So God brings in the fiery serpents that bites them, and they start dying. And so Moses prays, and what's the answer? He says, God, take away the snakes. And God says what? No, not going to take away the snake, but I am going to take away the consequence of being bitten. And all you have to do is look up at the bronze serpent on the pole and believe. Looking up is an act of belief. It's an act of faith. If I look up at this, because, I mean, not many of us go to we go to the doctors, right? We don't look up at the snake, all right? But theirs was an act of faith. If I believe what Moses told me, if I look up at this, I will be healed. And everyone who looked up was saved. And Jesus uses this example later on, doesn't he? All right, this is John. John has this example. So we don't become idolaters. We don't commit sexual immorality. We don't test Christ, all right? And nor should we complain as some of them did and were killed by the destroyer. Now, we think this is chapter Numbers 11 when they were complaining, gonguzmosing, all right? I love that Greek word because it just sounds gross. Gonguzmos, all right? That's what it's like when you complain, Catherine. When you complain about dinner, don't gongoose moss. That's nasty, okay? But they were destroyed. And what the text says, and God singed or burned up the outer edges of the camp. Now, again, there's so many times when they complained and so many times God reacted to their complaining that it's hard to nail it down, but this is probably the most accurate one. But what's he doing? Again, he's using the Jewish text, the Old Testament, and saying, here's what happened. Here's what has happened, all right? Again, he's going to lead into the food sacrifice to idols here in just a second. But he's trying to knock out this sort of, I don't want to say morality, but let's just keep going. 11, now these things happened to them as examples, and they were written as a warning to us. So what's the value of an example? Anybody grow up with a good example of what you should do in your life? Anybody grow up with an example of what not to do in your life? I have an older brother. He's 2 years older than me. He made some really bad decisions, and I'm just kind of sitting back going, don't do that. All right? It was an example for me, and he would do, I mean, my family, it's like minister of music family, and my brother is having a champagne breakfast with the girl he was dating, and he's like 18, 19, not 21 yet, and he's got a bottle of champagne in my parents' refrigerator, and he pulls this out like, this will be awesome, and I'm just sitting there going, this is going to be good. I'm just watching, eating popcorn, watching the whole show. But it was an example for me, all right? And I always grew up like this because I always just would observe people and go, okay, that's not the very smart thing to do because that just train wrecked. And so an example is good. What if we ignore those examples, though? Yes, you do. You become the example to someone else, all right? I always say there's two ways to learn, one by listening, one by experience, okay? What about warnings? What's the difference between an example and a warning? These things happen to them as examples, and they were written as a warning to us. What's the difference between an example and a warning? Okay. What else? Can you get any other compare and contrast? Why do we fall? Why do we make mistakes? Because the next line is what? So whoever thinks he stands, what does that mean? Who thinks they stand? Who thinks they're all good? Is that somebody looking at the examples and looking at the warnings? There's an arrogance to this statement. There's an arrogance to thinking I'm fine. No one can touch me. Nothing can hurt me. I would never do that. Have you ever heard that line before? I would never do something as dumb as that. Yeah, famous last words, and also watch that person now because now they're going to fall. So, so whoever thinks he stands, be careful. Literally the word blepo, to look. Look out, because now you will fall. All right, and generally the people who fall are the ones who do what with the examples and the warnings? Totally ignore them. See them as just irrelevant. That could never happen to me, in other words. So Paul is saying, you may want to read your Old Testament and see how they fell into these traps, all right? Because they thought the golden calf was what? Aaron, their high priest, told them what? This is the God who brought you out of Egypt. What had they known for 100 years in Egypt? Idolatry. They thought this is the way we would do it. The sexual immorality, Balaam goes behind their backs and says, hey, here's the way to trick them. Just introduce sexual immorality into this thing, and they'll fall for it every single time. All right? Those who tested Christ and those who were complaining, all led by people who led the complaining. It wasn't the masses that started complaining. It was the leaders who started complaining, wasn't it? And what happens when your leaders start to complain, or people perceived as leaders, when they start to complain? Somebody's always going to follow, all right? Generally weak people who don't have the nerve to stand up and say, wait. No. We're not going that down there, all right? Now, here's a verse you guys all know, and I want you to see it in context here. All right, so whoever thinks who stands must be careful, must get his eyes up, get your head on a swivel so that you don't fall. because no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to humanity. And God is faithful, and he will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. But with the temptation, he will also provide a way of escape so that you are able to bear it. All right? So he says, yeah, you better get your eyes open. If you think you're standing, you need to be careful. Keep your eyes open because temptation is just around the corner. All right? And it can sneak up on you faster than you can see it. And understand this, no temptation, no testing, that's the Greek word pyrazo, it can mean test or tempt, just depending on context. So no temptation has ever overtaken you. Does anybody have a different word? Everybody has overtaken. It's the word lambano, which means to take something away, to pick up something. It has overtaken you, except what is common to humanity. Anything? Any difference there? Seized, that overtaken is seized, yeah. That's pretty violent for that word. That's a pretty violent translation of that word, so I wouldn't go seized. I was like somebody, all right? It's just take you away. Because temptation doesn't seize you initially, right? Because if something attacks you, you defend yourself, right? Unless you're Chris Rock, all right? And then you just take it, all right? But if something comes in to seize you and takes you, sorry, I had to go there. Come on, I got to be relevant, right? But if Satan doesn't come and go, hi, I'm here to tempt you and to test you, and here's my pitchfork and my red tail. No, he kind of sneaks up on you. So there's a softness to this word that I don't want you to hear, that temptation is this violent action, all right? It's a very calm action. It's coming to take you away, right? So no temptation has overtaken you, come to take you, except what is common to humanity. We get our word anthropology from this word, all right? It's anthropologically normal. And no temptation, there's nothing new. The same temptation is the same temptation that's always been tempting people since Adam and Eve in the garden, all right? It's still the same mechanism. It's not like Satan went, I found a new one. No, we still have the same basic temptations, and we still fall for it, don't we? Sadly, yes, we do. Why? Because we shouldn't. Because God is faithful. No, God's not going to take a break. God will always be faithful to you, meaning he will always know who he is. He believes in who he is, and he acts accordingly. And he will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. Right, Job? He will not allow you to be tempted beyond. Will he allow you to be tempted? Yes. Yes, he will. But didn't God put stipulations on Job and Satan? You can do this, but you cannot do this. All right? He will not allow him because evidently whatever that line was, that was too far. Okay? So a good lesson from Job right there. He won't allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able. Okay? That's pretty comforting, isn't it? Is that comforting? To me, it's not very comforting because that means I'm the idiot that's sinning. That it's not that I'm being overwhelmed by this, it's I'm just that weak. And so God's going, I wasn't going to let him tempt you beyond what you're able, but you just fell right for it every time. And then, but with the temptation, all right, accompanying, this is the word kind of means accompanying, with the temptation, he will also make a way of escape. Ekbaino, to get out of, to lead you out of this thing so that you are able to bear it. All right? This word bear is hupo pharaoh. Hupo is under, and pharaoh means to carry something. Okay? So if you've ever been sort of loading something and unloading something, somebody starts putting stuff in your arms. I remember when the boys were young, we used to do this with firewood, and I'm like piling them up until I couldn't see their face anymore. And they're like, no, I got it. That's the imagery. I'm under it, and I'm carrying it. And God says, and Paul is writing, God's not going to give you a temptation that you can't handle, that it's going to break you, all right? So if you put bags of whatever on somebody's back, and they're like, I got it, and I'm marching up, and I'm going to put it down, and all this. No, you won't crumble underneath it. So here's the question I like to ask people. Can you go the rest of your life without sinning? Yes? And again, the operative word is can. not will, can you go the rest of your life without sinning? What are the dynamics of sin? Number one what? It's all common. There's nothing new. There's nothing fancy. There's nothing God's going, whoa, I didn't see that one coming. All right, that's a new play. I wasn't ready for that one. Number one, it's all common, and God is faithful. He's not going to allow you to be tempted beyond what you're able. It won't be able. And what's the third component? And there's always a way out. I like to say a lot of it's just with one thumb off, or maybe a click, power off, all right? Or maybe it's the hand covering the mouth, shut up. There's always a way out of sin. What's the question? Will I take it? Will I take it? All right? So, again, I wanted you to see this in context. He's talking about the sins of the Israelites early on. And now he's saying, look, we're in the same boat. And there's no excuse for sinning. There isn't. Because it's all common. He will not allow it to go beyond which you can stand. And he will give you a way out of that sin. Therefore, my dear friends, all right, see how he's making this argument? Therefore, in light of this, dear friends, all right, flee from idolatry, okay? And why is he writing this to the Corinthians? Because idolatry was everywhere, all right? Everywhere in Corinth, okay? So much so that what's the food source? What's in the markets? You go to the grocery store and what do you have? This was sacrificed to this idol, this was sacrificed to this idol, this was sacrificed to this idol, okay? That's the prevalence of it. You barely could buy food in Corinth that had not been sacrificed to idols, okay? Because when you prepare the food, you cook it, and what a convenient way to worship at the same time, all right? So, therefore, dear friends, flee from idolatry. I'm speaking to wise people. No, I'm speaking to you guys. You're thinking people, friend, all right? Schizophrenic. I'm speaking to people who are phrenic. They think, all right? Judge for yourselves what I say. And here's where he's going to start to create this comparison of communion to the sacrificing things to idols that we want to stay away from. The cup of blessing that we give thanks for, all right? This can be the word Eucharist, all right? Have you ever heard somebody say, yeah, we're taking the Eucharist this Sunday at church, all right? We generally don't use that language, right? We use what language? Lord's Supper, communion, whatever. All right, you go to a more Episcopalian, Catholic, more formal religion, they'll use that phrase, the Eucharist. All right, the cup of blessing that we give thanks for, is it not a sharing in the blood of Christ? All right, anybody have a different word for sharing? Participation, okay. The word back here, right in the middle, the fellowship, the koinos, that's the same word right here. All right, so this idea, the cup of blessing that we give thanks for, is it not sharing, fellowshipping, having in common? All right, and in the Old Testament, this word is not a good word. It's something that's shared. I always say, share a piece of bubble gum with all your friends. It's kind of nasty, okay? And that's sort of the imagery in the Old Testament. In the New Testament, the idea is more of let's share our lives together. Look at the early church. Did they do that? What did they do with their possessions? They came and laid them at the apostles' feet so that no one had need. They lived in koinos. They lived in sharing. And when we take the cup of blessing, communion, all right, are we not sharing in the blood of Christ? Are we not creating fellowship, communion? That's kind of where we get this idea, this communion with the blood of Christ. And what would be the answer to that rhetorical question? Are we? Is it not sharing in the blood of Christ? Yes, absolutely. So our ritual identifies us, fellowships us with the blood of Christ. And what he's going to say is, well, what about their ritual? Does that do the same thing? Culturally, does it do the same thing? The bread that we break, is it not a sharing in the body of Christ? Same idea, all right? 17, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body. Now, he's going to pick up on this in chapter 12 when we start talking about spiritual gifts, so he's kind of aiming forward. For all of us share, different word there, all right? Share that one bread. Verse 18, look at the people of Israel. Right? He's just saying Jewish culture. Do not those who eat the sacrifices, again, participate, koinos, share, create fellowship in what is offered on the altar? To which the answer is what? Yeah, what's Jewish law? What happens to the sacrifice that is offered? What do the priests do with it? They consume it. If you did your sacrifices at your home, wherever you were in Israel, when you killed the cow, put it on the altar, the burnt offering, what'd you do with it? You consumed it, right? It was part of the ritual that you would do this. And he's saying, look, we're not that dissimilar from these pagan religions in the way they practice it and the way we practice it. It's a very similar concept. 19. What am I saying then? That food sacrificed to an idol is anything, or that an idol is anything? No, but I do say that what they sacrifice to demons and not to God. I do not want you to participate, fellowship, koinos, with demons. Now, what has he said all along about food sacrificed to idols? It's nothing to those who have kind of processed this out, thought through it, deconstructed the whole thing, and went, burgers. All right? Because the idol is nothing. So they're sacrificing it to nothing. So really, it's just food. And as long as I say, thank God for the food, let's eat, I'm okay. Now, that's okay for someone who has a strong conscience, right? And that's the language he uses. What about the one who has the weak conscience? No. And this is what he's kind of trying to protect from, right? 21, you cannot drink the cup of the Lord. All right, did I skip something? Hold on. No, I'm okay. Okay. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot share in the Lord's table and the table of demons. All right? Now, that language, is that Paul's language, or is that the language that he would sort of apply to a weaker conscience? Paul's kind of processed this through, hasn't he? Would Paul go, this is the cup of the Lord and this is the cup of demons? No, he would go communion, grape juice. Not a problem, all right? The Lord's table, referring to the bread, he would go, this is the body of Christ, and this is bread, okay? But the weaker conscious person would not see it this way, and Paul is always aware of this. In 22, he says, or would we or are we provoking the Lord to jealousy if in our weakened conscience we eat this way, all right? Are we stronger than he? In 23, he repeats this line, everything is permissible, but not everything is helpful, all right, beneficial. It's the word sumphero. Hupophero is to bear up under something. Sumphero is, hey, let's carry this together, all right? There's advantage to working together. Everything is permissible, but not everything builds up. No one, listen carefully, because this is his couple of chapters ago, he said, if eating meat causes my brother to stumble, what will I do? Never will I eat meat again, all right? This is a very similar line. No one should seek his own good, but, on the contrary, the good of the other person, all right? That's the principle. That's the principle in play. He's not going to violate that principle. If eating meat causes someone to sin because I love that person, I will never eat meat again. No one should seek his own good. No one should walk around going, well, I can do whatever I want, and if they trip, if they stumble, that's their problem. They should be stronger. They should be this. They should be that, whatever, right? I heard somebody this week just talking about sexual immorality, that it's guys' problem if they look at a girl lustfully and it's not the girl's problem. And they said, well, number one, it is the guy's problem. It is the guy's fault if he stumbles into sexual immorality. And it's also the guy or the girl's fault for dressing immodestly and causing that to happen. So they're both at fault, not one or the other. It's not one person's fault or the other's fault. It's his fault for falling into it. It's his or her fault for dressing immodestly, causing that to happen. Right? They're both at fault, okay? So no one should seek his own good, but the good of others. 25, yeah. Eat everything that is sold in the meat market. Now, he's going to get to an example here. He's going to get sort of a for instance. Eat everything that is sold in the meat market, asking no questions for conscience sake. What question would you ask? If you're going to ask questions? Yeah. Where's on the label? Does it have, this has been sacrificed to that? Yes, put it on the label. Made in China. They're probably made in China. Who knows? Everything's made in China these days. All right? Eat everything that's sold, asking no questions. Don't check the label. All right? Don't look at your macros. You don't want to know how many carbs are in that thing. Okay? Just eat it. Okay? Asking no questions for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's and all that is in it. Now, is that a strong conscience person that would do that? Or is that a weak conscience? Strong. Okay, that's a pretty good definition right there. For somebody that says, for the earth is the Lord's and all that's in it, that's a strong conscience, right? And that's not just strong, but mature, a matured conscience. The one who has properly deconstructed this issue and not just, whatever, let's eat, all right? No, that you're still weak. You're just too stupid to realize it, okay? 27. Here's a different scenario. So the first scenario is go to the market, grab you some food, grab you some burgers, head home, grill them out, enjoy, all right? 27. If one of the unbelievers invites you over and you want to go, somebody asks you to dinner, sure, let's go to dinner. Eat everything that is set before you, again, the same phrase, without asking or raising questions. Don't look for the labels. Don't ask, well, what about this and what about this? Just eat. Eat. Why? Because the matured conscience knows full well there's nothing wrong with meat, all right? It's just meat, all right? 28, but, big but right here. But if someone says to you, you know this food was offered to an idol. Now, why would someone say that to a believer in Corinth in the first century? What? To test you? So, well, you know this is sacrificed to idols, and you're like, oh, let's eat it anyway. What are they thinking? Compromise. That you're willing to compromise. That you don't have any solid standards. That you sort of run right past it. Now, would you say they have that deconstructed conscience of, well, it's just meat, so I can eat it anyway? No, they have a weaker conscience than the one who has at least started to approach the subject. All right? So you cannot do that. You cannot do that because this person is simply going to see what you do. I've talked about this with our kids, with alcohol. I said, well, when we're 21, isn't it okay if we drink? I said, sure it is, but don't plan on having a witness. Don't plan on being an effective witness to anyone in your life because what they see is that person claims to be a Christian and now they're drinking. And in their mind, and we've had this long conversation with Holland just about all the things that these issues. And say, look, you are going to confuse people when you start to live your life in a manner that seems contradictory to their understanding of what Christians do and do not do. You will confuse them. So you can't do that publicly. And I've told you before, I've been out to dinner and seen two of the most prominent Christian leaders that I knew of at the time. One's a speaker and one's a singer, sitting there with 3 or 4 drinks on their table at dinner. And I'm thinking, man, if somebody who was just at their conference where he spoke and he sang are now seeing this, what's going to happen? They're going to be confused, especially if they have a weaker conscience. What's going to happen? That's not going to be beneficial to them, is it? They're not going to go, wow, now I understand Jesus. No, it's just going to confuse them. And this is what Paul is saying. If someone says to you, this food is offered to an idol, do not eat it. All right? Because whose conscience is he protecting? The unbeliever, the one who said, hey, you know this was sacrificed to idols, okay? Because if I'm a strong believer and I've gone work through the whole process, I'm okay, all right? But that person is not. I've made the comment before, you know, it's you coming to church is not going to get you into heaven, but it might get your neighbor into heaven. If you don't come to church and you're a Christian, you'll be fine, but your neighbor probably won't be. Because when they see you going to church, you have a testimony now. You have a witness now. You have an example now. In college, I was the one guy on my hall up on Sunday mornings ready to go to church because they all knew I was a believer. They all knew I was a Christian. And what if they come by my room at 11 o'clock and I'm sleeping in? Now what happened? What happened to my witness? Christians don't sleep in on Sunday morning. Christians go to church. So I had to maintain that, not that I didn't want to, but it was important to me to maintain that witness and that testimony throughout it. I never drank when I was in college. Why? Because they knew I was a Christian. I was made it very clear I was a Christian. And had I drank, what would have happened to my testimony? Again, so what's he doing? I want to love people enough so that I maintain my testimony. So do not eat it out of consideration for the one who told you and for conscience sake. I do not mean your own conscience, but the other person's, the weaker person's. Why? For why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? My freedom isn't, but my love for that person compels me to live limiting my freedom. See that? In a vacuum, I got the freedom to do whatever. I have the freedom to eat whatever. It doesn't matter. But when I step out of that vacuum and I encounter other people and other consciences, now everything matters. Every step I take, everything I do, every word I say, every action I have, it all matters now. And so what he's arguing here from why is my freedom judged by another person's conscience? You know why? Because you love them. You love them enough to be a witness, to be a testimony, to be a strong figure in their life. 30, if I partake with thanks, why am I slandered or blasphemed? Because of something I give thanks for. Again, in a vacuum, sure. Go for it. Knock yourself out. Have yourself a glass of wine. Do whatever it is you want to do. But when you step out of that vacuum, now you get to or need to or compelled to love one another. And what does that include? I don't trip their conscience. I don't do things that may confuse them or limit my ability to speak truth into them or invalidate my own witness. 31, here's another verse you've heard, I'm sure, before. Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do everything for God's glory. All right, now you've heard that before, right? Now you know the context. Whether I eat at this guy's house or drink at this guy's house or don't eat and don't drink or whatever comes across, I want to do everything for the glory of God. Now, is that a life ambition of Paul? Whatever I do, I want to do it for the glory of God. All right? That is one of the life ambitions he's going to have in this paragraph. I love this. That's what he says. That's the goal. That's the standard. All right? Why do I not drink? Because I want to glorify God. Why do I not eat food sacrificed to idols? Why do I not do this? Why do I not do this? Why do I not do this? For the glory of God. All right? That's the ambition of my life, is to bring glory to God. That's the whole thing. All right? 32. So I give no offense to the Jews or the Greeks or the church of God, which I like that breakdown, because basically what he's saying is to the hardcore Jews, the law-abiding Jews, to the Gentiles, the non-law-abiding, don't have the law Greeks, and to the church that's really working this thing out. They're somewhere in the middle. They are followers of Christ, but they're not hardcore Jews. I don't want to offend any of those guys, all right? And this word, that the give offense, is very similar to the word where the woman was bent over. I don't want to bend anyone. I don't want to bend anyone over. It's proskupto. Kupto is to bend, right? And that woman that was bent over, I don't want to whack anybody so they're knocked off balance, kind of as a way to explain it. Just as I also try to please all people in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many. Why? So that, always effective clause, so that they may be saved. So what are the two great ambitions of Paul? Number one, give glory to God in everything I do, so that, what? Others may be saved. That's a pretty awesome way to live right there. All right? And what other issues can you apply? If it's not food sacrificed to idols, can it be in our culture? Can it be drinking? Can it be alcohol? All right? Can it be whatever else? Smoking, drinking, gluttony, using bad language. That's one we've had at our house, that little argument we've had at our house. It's just a word, just syllables. Yeah, but those syllables have meaning to people outside the vacuum, okay? So we want to bring glory to God so that they might be saved. And if we destroy our witness, if we destroy our testimony, what happens? Does God get glory? Do they get saved? It short circuits everything, all right? And that's why Paul says, I love people. I want to be witness to them. So I'm not going to compromise, and I'll never eat meat again, culminating here at the end of 10, all right? I was trying to think of anything else I had. Looks good. Any questions, comments, thoughts, opinions, snide remarks? Seeing none. Yes, Josh. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You impute it. The head. Yeah, put the head. You impute sin. Go ahead. I think that was in the sacrificial system, that they would impute sin into the animal. I don't think communion, the cup and the bread, is a picture of imputing sin. If anything, it would be the recognition of the sin that was imputed onto Christ, and I therefore receive that concept of imputation through that sacrificial system, through the remembrance of the blood of Christ and the body of Christ. So it's almost kind of reversed. It's almost not so much a imputation, but a appreciation of the imputation, or a fellowship, building communion with that imputation. Does that make sense? It's kind of complicated, but it's not the same thing. I don't want you to think that in some way that I'm imputing my sins by drinking this. It's remembrance of what Christ has done. That's what Christ says. Do this in remembrance of me, not to activate some type of imputation. Just a little difference, okay? All right, let me pray for us and we'll go. Father, thank you so much for, again, letting us see the heart of Paul and just the beauty of his words and the practicality of what he was trying to teach the Corinthians. Father, I pray that we would be receptive to these words, that we would understand the heart that is behind them, and that we would understand that we have a great, great responsibility every single day of our life. Father, may we live our lives as if everything we do and everything we say is not just life and death, but it's eternity for everyone we encounter. So, Father, may we live with that consciousness. May we live with the beauty of those moments and the beauty of the opportunities that you give us to affect eternity in the lives of those we encounter. So, Father, may we seek to glorify you, and may we seek that those around us might be saved from the wrath that has come. And I pray this in Jesus' name.